Didi, Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year. Happy Year of the Snake to you and your family. It's great to see you.
Good to see you. Thank you so much. And as you know, while you're traveling to the west coast of the US, the movie Nezha 2 is really going skyrocketing in the box office. What do you make of its success?
哪吒，好久不见呐！你愿与老夫一同出征否？
战家，我最擅长。我乃哪吒三太子。
瞧瞧瞧瞧，一身正气。
能降妖来，化作尸，排斥，收你们来了。
Well, a couple of things. First of all, it's been a great Chinese New Year for Chinese cinema with, there's been several strong performers. But in the case of Nezha, I remember going back to the Nezha 1 in 2019 and sitting in the movie theater and thinking to myself, wow, this is a home run, because it really had you could see that China had developed a modern yet its own style of animation, and it's based on such a famous story. And to see it, how good the movie was actually, I had chills sitting in the theater for Nezha 1. So I myself was highly anticipating Nezha 2, as clearly many audiences were. I just think that Yuan, the director, has done a great job with the material and the film. The film is so good on a story level, on a technical level, and also it's very Chinese. I'm very interested. I'm going to go see it in the theaters in Los Angeles this weekend because it's being distributed in the United States now. I don't have any box office numbers for the US. I was looking before we started today, but it's in quite a few cinemas in several cities, more than normal, because I think that the movie is performing quite well. It's performing. It may be the highest grossing animated film in a home market ever. So I think it's just it's because it's a great film, and there was such anticipation for the movie. But I would also say that the other films, if you look at Detective Chinatown 1900 is at over $300 million. I mean, the Boonie Bears is almost at 100 million. Creation of the Gods is at over 100 million. So, and even Legend of Condor, Tsui Hark's film, is probably going to cross the $100 million mark. Those are extraordinary numbers for all those movies. So
Right.
It's just been a great return of the Chinese New Year cinema going experience for audiences in China.
What do you make of the fact that there are Chinese movies and Chinese homemade movies mainly that are lined up at the Spring Festival film listing these days? We do not see any foreign film being priority distributed in movie theaters.
The Chinese Film Bureau reserves Chinese New Year and a few other key times in the year specifically for Chinese releases. So you could say a regulatory matter. But I also would think that if I was releasing a foreign film, if I was and I have been responsible for that business for a number of studios over the years, I would probably not release it at Chinese New Year unless I had something that I was extremely confident that Chinese audiences were wanting to see, because it is absolutely the most competitive time of year in the cinemas. So you'd have to have something extraordinary that already had great success, perhaps a sequel. And with Chinese movies improving, foreign movies, US movies have not been performing as they once did in the China market as well. That's just a fact of the market today.
What do you make of the combination of commercial interests and government regulations on New Year season's films, overall speaking?
As I said, unless I had a film that I was very confident, that I was very certain that, and I'm speaking of an American film, that Chinese audiences wanted to see. You'd have to think about it very carefully if it could withstand the competition, because these are generally the best movies, the best Chinese movies of the year. It's a big Chinese holiday. I think there are other holiday periods that are also longer holiday periods, like the summer holiday period, which is a strong box office season as well, where for a foreign film, for a US film, I would feel more comfortable. There's the May Day holiday, which is always a good slot for releasing. That again, I would feel much more comfortable with that. The October 1st holiday is also another. These holiday periods where people have several days off are very good release points. But I think the Chinese New Year has historically been, it's do or die for a lot of these films. And again, when you put a film out in this kind of competitive situation, even if it wasn't regulated, I'd have to be very, very certain that it was had a built-in audience to it. And also you have to spend. People just don't go to these movies. There are marketing dollars involved and sponsorship involved, and the marketing is very, very competitive at this time of year. I'm sure you've seen on your Douyin accounts and your WeChat account, the mass amount of marketing that goes into the success of these films, and that is a factor. So you've got to spend a lot of, the distributors have to spend a lot of money to make these films perform the way that they do.
Having said that, though, you've seen Chinese animations been produced and also made based on traditional stories. The stories that have been in the fairy tales, in traditional literature for sometimes hundreds of years. What do you make of these kinds of adaptations vis-a-vis original stories based on latest works?
They're very, very, Nezha is very well adapted. And I think that in creating, using obviously one of the most famous, novels in Chinese history, you could get stuck in tradition. But what Yuan has done with the characters is to make them very relatable in a modern way, so that audiences feel, and especially younger audiences, can relate to the emotions of the character of kind of being an outcast, and who finds himself and finds his friends. And I think that's something that is very relatable for young people today. And also visually, the animation itself is it's highly stylized, and it's very it's not like he's copying anything from elsewhere. It's not like he's copying anime or an American style. It's very modern, but it's also a very original style. So I think that's also, and the music is fantastic. I just think the film is a 5-star film all the way around. In the adaptation, again, he's done a great job making the characters very relatable to modern audiences in their internal struggles, and they're figuring out who they are and who they want to be.
Professor Teng, you heard earlier what Didi said about her takeaway of this film. What is your understanding of the dramatic success of this movie, at least in the box office?
I think this is quite a new genre, with very stylistic, very exciting, and with lots of new tech. Really high tech being applied to the production of the film. At the same time, I think this is family-centric, the family theme, meaning that it is all about getting together a family of 4, 5, 6, kids, grandkids, and dads and parents actually into this movie theater and enjoy the fun, the super fun. All the actions, the stories, the music, the fight sequence, and most importantly of all, it's all about this very rebellious spirit, as demonstrated in Nezha. It is all about this very lively character with such a great sort of a spirit, the fighting spirit, that and the confidence I mean, the justice prevail evil sort of ethos demonstrated in this great film. And consider the use of CGI, the animation, the very creative use of this classical story. I mean, by embracing this modern storytelling technique, it is amazing. It is full of wow elements.
Right. Nezha, of course, has been quite a unique character in Chinese traditional literature and fairy tales. Rather, somewhat similar to the Monkey King, kind of a rebellious character, but still have to exist within certain frameworks in a way, this character. Quite an interesting one. But having said that, though, you see both Nezha and several other successful Chinese animation films are coming in sequels. Is this likely to be the trend, Didi?
And I'm actually I'm developing a film with a Chinese animator based on a series. And I think when you have, Nezha is a great piece of material to be able to, when you make an animated film or any film, ideally you want to be able to make a second, a third, and a fourth film if the film works. And so the breadth of the material of Nezha certainly allows for that. I mean, Feng Shan is one of the most renowned novels in Chinese history. There's a lot of directions you could go, but I think they've done a great job, keeping the focus on Nezha and his compatriots, and again building off of that. And I feel there's a long runway. But when you're creating, so much of the business today is driven by intellectual property, and China happens to have a plethora of intellectual property that can be exploited, and you don't actually have to buy it because it's over 75 years old, and so it makes it a lot easier. I mean, but basically, most of the platforms in China and most of the platforms globally, when they develop a film or a series, whether it's animated or live action, they want to use intellectual property if possible because there's built-in audience. So it's a safer bet. And there's also a lot more opportunity to create ancillary businesses so you can sell the consumer products. I'm sure there's going to be a wealth of Nezha clothing and Nezha toys that you're going to see kids playing with and,
Absolutely.
wearing, in the years to come. So it really, it's and that isn't a traditional part of the Chinese ecosystem in our industry. So I think it's going to give companies like Disney a run for their money.
We see these films that are popular during the Spring Festival season are mainly those coming from the late 70s, early 80s generation in China. So I know that both of you have been working over the decades with different generations of Chinese filmmakers. Didi, for example, you have been having a continuous cooperation with Jiang Wen and several other big names in Chinese movie. And Professor Teng, I understand you work not only with big names, but also some of the experimental film producers when they were making small art film movies. So what do you make of this generation that seems to make their name now at the Spring Festival season?
If you look at the fifth generation, starting with Chen Kai-ke back in the 1980s, you can see their films are artsy, the kind of art house movies, tapping into the very Chinese recent past, rural revolutions, and the Chinese pursued modernity in the 1980s. But the younger generations are not. The younger generations are very much kind of experimenting with different themes. They're very much kind of pro-social realities. If you look at Jiang Wen's film, for example, or see Wang Chao's film, or even Geng Jun's film, whom you interviewed once. And you can see they are deep into the social realities of China, very critical of the kind of a transition and transformation of a China from a kind of an old market economy, in an old kind of a planned economy into a new market economy. And so you see the difference. And also the technology use. This is a generation, the younger generation especially, are tech savvy, lots of use of CGIs, lots of focus on animation, CFX, and the great techniques which are now being kind of used to increase the kind of stunning visual imageries of characters. And so they prove to be very, very innovative and very pioneering in this case.
We are looking forward to continue our conversation on Chinese movies and beyond. Thank you so much for both of you joining us. All the best.